Hey review family, keep it tight. My name is Jay Morris, Review Guy, and I'm back again to bring you another video. And in this one I'm going to be covering the new Soilwork album entitled Verklighten. Appointed Crucifixion, if you're watching this video, I really apologize for that. So, Soilwork, pretty renowned in the melodic death metal scene. They hail from Sweden. They were formed in 1995, currently signed to Nuclear Blast, and this is their 11th studio-length album. And if you watched my most anticipated projects of 2019 video, you will know that this was one of the projects that I was really excited for. And this album caught me off guard in more than one way, some for the better, some for the worse, so let's get right into the album. I don't think you can at this point write Soilwork off as a melodic death metal band. This album, more than any other album that I've ever heard from the band, is as least melodic death metal as I've heard them. They employ thrash metal elements, they employ folk metal elements, they employ just folk in general elements, they employ some traditional heavy metal elements. There is singing on this album, quite prominently there is singing on this album. There is of course the melodic death metal aspects, there's progressive metal aspects. So much goes into this album that you can't simply say, oh, this is a melodic death metal album, that's it. At 12 tracks and 50 minutes and 17 seconds, I can say, without a shadow of a doubt, this album can feel bloated, and it's a problem that a lot of melodic death metal bands have, similar to what technical death metal struggles with a lot of times, where you'll have these bloated albums with a lot of fluff in the middle, with things that don't really feel like they need to be there, or feeling the need to make overly long songs that kind of go through the same changes from the start to the finish, and could have been trimmed down for a shorter runtime. But that's my personal opinion, and anyone that thinks this album is a good length, that's fine. The self-titled track opens it up. This is kind of just an introduction. It's about 1 minute and 47 seconds, I believe. Super epic type of intro, very frigid. It sounds almost like a video game soundtrack or something from a movie soundtrack or a TV show opening. I think that the harmony's really great and it works really well for opening up the album with a good sound. Arrival really does start the track listing off in a good way when it comes to actual like full-length songs, and I love the blast beats on this track. I think the blast beats work really well. The guitar work is very tight, and the epic traditional singing that finds its way onto the chorus, locking in with these blast beats and very precise guitar work that sounds very melodic. I like that a lot. I am very surprised that he is able to stay really on pitch and forceful and prominent. I think it's very impressive, and I do like this track quite a bit. Bleeder DESPOILER is a bit underwhelming for me. The vocals work pretty well, but when it comes to the screams and the growls, I don't think that they work all that well. I feel like they go into a bit of that status quo territory, and the singing on this track is pretty well done. I have to give it that. But for the most part, it is an underwhelming track and doesn't live up to the potential that the first and second tracks did in terms of being out there, being boundary pushing, being interesting. And not that this album is boundary pushing, it pretty much does stick to a lot of classical things when it comes to melodic death metal, but Bleeder DESPOILER didn't work as well in my opinion. One thing I can compliment though is the forcefulness and the power behind the vocals as well as the thrashy elements. This does have a thrash feel to it. Full Moon SHOALS really does have an epic kind of folk metal introduction, which I do enjoy. I'm a sucker for folk in metal, I gotta admit that. It starts with some catchy singing and more traditional sounding heavy metal and thrash metal feel to it. It's not really blasting your ears away with melodic death metal. The Nurturing Glance is my favorite track on this entire album. Love the verses on this track as well as the chorus. I think the chorus is super catchy, and this whole track is like melodic death metal as it should be, balancing out beauty and kind of harmony with brutality and heaviness. And everything about this track is really good. It's 5 minutes and 25 seconds, so it's a little bit longer, but I really do like this track. When the Universe Spoke has the same issue that a lot of tracks on this album has, and that is having a really nice intro, but then descending into kind of some cliche melodic death metal territory. I do enjoy the intro to this track, but the rest of it is pretty meh. Definitely not a standout. STALFAGEL, I'm so sorry if you're Swedish and watching this, opens up with some nice synths. The instrumentation on this track is very good. It reminds me kind of a groove metal type of feel with some thrash influences. Almost sounds somewhat like an In Flames track, especially if you count Battles, their last album, which I think this does sound a lot like In Flames. Alyssa White Gluz from Arch Enemy appears on this track, and that's the only thing that I can really say is not that good, is I don't think she adds much to the track, but that's where my opinionated beliefs come in, because I'm not an Arch Enemy fan, so that may just be me, but I don't like Arch Enemy for the most part, and I don't think she adds much to this overall track. But overall, I think this track has some nice singing, some good instrumentation, and is overall a good track. Definitely a standout. The Wolves are back in town. There is nothing interesting about this track to me. This is probably my least favorite track on the entire album. It is melodic death metal 101. There's nothing that interesting going into this track, from the vocals to the instrumentation to the lyrical themes. There's not much about this track that stands out to me whatsoever. WITAN or WITAN is a very catchy and to the point track. The intro riffs sound like an early 2000s metalcore band, and I know that sounds super weird. It's not a metalcore song, trust me, but it does have that metalcore feel from the start, and this is straight to the point. I like that. It's short. It's only like 3 minutes and 48 seconds, I believe, if I remember correctly. It's straight to the point. It's catchy. It has that nice melodic death metal feel. It's not like the most biggest standout track from the album, but it still is a nice track. The Ageless Whisper is a nice track, but it is something I want to point out for this entire album that I forgot to. This starts off epic. I will say that. This track starts off very epic, but it also starts out with something that peppers its way through so many of these tracks. And that is the stereotype that I feel bad that Soilwork followed, that a lot of melodic death metal bands follow, and that is opening up every single track, or near every single track, with this. Like, do you have to open up with an O intro? Melodic death metal and technical death metal have this issue where they need to open up with like the oh, like the rising O. I don't like songs that start out that way. I find it cliche, I find it tropish, and I don't like the stereotype that technical death metal bands and melodic death metal bands follow that, but it's pretty much true. Other than that, this is a good track, and it's something I wanted to point out for the whole album, is that those O's are all across this whole album. ACQUIVER ends out the track listing pretty strong. It features Dave Sheldon on guitar work, which I haven't personally heard of him, and I even looked him up and could not find that much about him. This has an epic intro, a lot like the rest of this album, and I love the pauses and nice singing alongside mixed vocals of screams and growls. I like it when bands do that, when they have the singing and growls or screams mixed together. Very prominent mixing, very good production on this track. The outro sounds very nice. It almost sounds futuristic to some degree, and I do like this track as an ender to the album. So all in all, this can feel bloated. I can't say it's a perfect listen from start to finish, but there are more tracks that I really do like than not, and there are some great ideas going into this track listing. Although there are some bloated parts, there are some tracks that are a bit and there is some melodic death metal 101. But at this point in melodic death metal, that seems to be on every single album. I would suggest checking this out if you like melodic death metal, technical death metal, folk metal, or if you just like Soilwork, or if you just are interested and want to check it out. I highly suggest checking it out. I'm going to be giving this album a 7 out of 10. I believe that's a good score, and I think that is a wrap. Is that a wrap? That's a wrap. So be sure to like this video if you enjoyed, subscribe, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. Helps me out a lot, and leave a comment down below what were your thoughts of this album if you've heard it, and I'll talk to you guys next time. But until then, my name is Jay Morris, the Review Guy, and I'm signing off saying farewell.